Hey, welcome to Generator, my friends. I am Matt, and thanks for coming back. And if you're joining us for the first time, I appreciate you being here. So tonight's going to be really interesting. I think this is a topic that a lot of us deal with on a daily basis. And the guest that I have on tonight, I think, is really going to shed some light on this issue that we all have, because when we all got into creative work, we wanted to do a little bit of everything. And then we kind of spent years drowning in all of it. My guest today, Sean McCormick, did the opposite on purpose. So he spent years as a public school special education teacher, and at some point he started paying attention to what his students really needed, which was basically the skills that nobody was teaching them, like how do you start something? How do you plan it? How do you follow through? All of that stuff is called executive function. And we're not going to dwell on a lot of that, but what I wanted to focus on with Sean was how he moved into what he's doing now, because he left public education. He walked away from the steady paycheck. He had two young daughters at home, and he bet his whole future on this one narrow lane that he was going into. And surprise, surprise, it worked. So he built the executive function specialists and then the executive function coaching academy to train other executive function coaches. And then he co-founded upskill specialists for adults. He's got a newsletter that goes out to about 6,000 people, and they actually open the email. So if you've got an email list and you've ever sent an email out to a list, you realize what a small miracle that is to get people to actually open the emails. But he does it. 6,000 people on the list. That's huge. And here's why I wanted him here. So Sean and I are together in a program put on by eCam called Content Compass. And it's kind of part accountability, part brainstorming, part mastermind, all about video and live streaming. And so I've gotten to know Sean over the past couple of months, and he's living proof of the thing that most of us are a little bit scared of. He got smaller on purpose. Right? So he found his one thing, he ignored everything else, and he built himself this really devoted following of true fans. He doesn't chase big anonymous crowds. He doesn't chase vanity numbers. And that's the conversation that I wanted to have with him today. Now, he told me he's an open book. I'm going to take him at his word. So we're going to find out how that is. But I want to welcome to Generator, Sean McCormick. Sean, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing well, and thank you, Matt. I really loved how you framed that and set me up for success. I hope I can deliver on that epic introduction, and I'm delighted to be here.
That's all the good stuff that I'm going to say. Now it's just going to dig in with both hands. All right. So hopefully I didn't destroy the notion of what executive function is, but I hear it tossed around in the creative community a lot. And I think the fact that as adults, we don't necessarily start and finish everything that we do. And you found this world in executive function coaching. And before we get into that, though, because that's a conversation that you've had and people can watch podcasts and all that, I want to go back to before everything that you started and everything you founded. I want to go back to Alaska, where you were doing some fishing and you were trying to figure out life. So let's go back a little bit and kind of trace the steps of, between being in Alaska and working in a lodge to executive function coaching.
I just want to appreciate you for finding that. I'm not even sure how you found that, where I talked about that. But yeah, let's go back to Alaska, because that was one of the most formative experiences of my life. I was a real wanderer, I guess I would say, not homeless, but a wanderer or without home. I'm not sure of the appropriate term for that at this point, but so I would go off, and so for example, and can you hear me, Matt? It froze up on my side. I want to make sure I'm not losing you. Can you hear me?
Everything's great. Everything's great.
Good. So yeah, so one summer, I think it was after maybe my freshman or sophomore year of college, I went to Alaska and spent like 2 months there, working on a lodge in the Misty Fjords. So this is I guess a national park or maybe like a national area where they don't allow like construction or anything. But there was this one lodge there that basically this very wealthy man had like bought before it was designated or something, or it was like the one piece of property you could own in this place. So you had to fly into this area and then take a boat in, like a little boat into this area. And I worked there the whole summer, basically like packing king salmon into like freeze dried bags for guests. But my primary focus there was to meditate and to just spend the summer in an isolated area, do some type of chop wood, carry water type energy, and meditate and just try to get in touch with something greater than myself. And what can I say? I mean, that's like, I don't know, that's kind of like, I'm both like, you were describing my niche as narrow, and it is narrow. And I'm also someone who's like looking for the answer in life. Like, I feel like I'm a seeker, I'm like, where's the truth and what is it? And that was probably, more of an example of a lot of the wandering that I did until I found this thing that I was like, okay, and that's kind of like how I try to teach people is like, in life, you want to find the thing that's the intersection of what you're good at, what people will pay for, what you know a lot about, and what you enjoy doing. I think they call it ikigai. And at that time, I didn't know what it was, but I knew I wanted to like spend time in nature and, follow my I guess you could say like desire to be attuned to life. And that's what that looked like at that time.
Got it. So now fast forward a little bit and you get into teaching, right? You've packed all the salmon that you can possibly pack. And
yeah.
you never want to see this.
I shipped back 150 pounds of salmon, and I gave it to everybody I knew, like king salmon that we caught that summer. I shipped it back in a suitcase and gave it, and people were like, "That is the best salmon." I mean, it was wild caught king salmon from the Misty Fjords in Alaska, and that's a good memory. That's a good memory.
That's great. So in 2019, right? You're teaching. This is pre-pandemic. And there's got to be a moment, like a point in the day where you're like, if I do this one more time, I'm going to lose my mind. Did things start to percolate there and say, I've got to change my direction? Was there something that was happening like every day? You're like, I just can't do this again. Where did the smoke start to rise in thinking that you had to go a different direction from what you were doing?
Yeah, so it's actually is an interesting segue because that journey to Alaska was about idealism, and thinking that there's something out there, kind of seeking. And I think public education or being a teacher is a similar journey, right? We want to serve families, students, our country, right? I've always believed in some level of civic engagement. Before I was a teacher, I did what's a program called City Year, where I volunteered a year in the New York City public school system right out of high school. And so I've always believed in these, like, I've been idealistic, I guess you could say. And teaching was the intersection, or I guess where my ideals hit reality of public education, because public education has a lot of problems and challenges, like any big institution, but probably more than most, I guess, because it's so massive. And I think there was multiple moments, but the big one for me, the big one was probably when my wife and I had our first child, and I wanted to go part-time, to go 4 days a week. And I had come up with a plan in my district with one of my teacher aides who was going through a credentialing program, which allowed her to do a student teaching experience where it would have worked. And we set this all up, and I went to my leadership, and it was just a hard no. It was like, nope. And I got to also give you the context that the classroom I was running was what's known as a counseling-rich classroom. So I had taken this, it was basically a parking lot, and they had plopped down a portable, and I had built an actual room in there. Like I decorated the whole thing, chose everything that was going to be in there. And then also all the kids who had come there were coming from residential treatment. So these were kids who were coming from the most like intensive environments, and were trying to transition back into their home environment where things had been difficult. Some of them had drug problems or had been completely avoidant of school, and they needed that restrictive environment like residential treatment, but now they were trying to transition back. So this was a real like, what do you call like when you go from one world to another, it was a real like kind of bridge, and I was really proud of that. And I wanted to continue doing it. I just needed an accommodation as my wife and I had our first child. And the inflexibility of the system was the moment I realized that you can't defeat or work with a system that is not based on like relationships. And I was like, you know what? I don't think I want to spend the rest of my life like in a system that has zero flexibility for the evolving person that I am. Right? I was still 100% committed, but I needed this accommodation in order to raise my daughter, because I was the primary picker upper and dropper offer and things like that. So that was just like one of those moments where you're like, oh, like this is not going to work for the next 20 years. And that's when I started to really think about like, what's another way I can make a living, which is probably something that most teachers go through.
And as both of my parents were teachers, and my dad was a teacher for almost 50 years. So yeah, there's a lot of that constant, how do we make ends meet? How do we do this? So in speaking to your wife around the kitchen table, what did that conversation sound like as you guys started to talk this through?
Yeah. What was that? I think, in those early moments, it was like, hey, I want to figure this out. And my wife is such a patient woman. So if we rewind even a bit more, I've gone through so many iterations of Sean before I went to Alaska. No, it was after I went to Alaska, but before I became a teacher, I went through a period where I wanted to be a successful rapper. And I was like committed to that vision. And so for years, I'm kind of like Mom Donnie in New York. He was a rapper before he became the mayor, I guess. I really invested in learning how to produce music and, setting up all the mic and everything. And that's probably where I got my passion for entrepreneurship in some ways. But my wife, she tolerated me going through this chapter for years. And it was never commercially successful, but it was a good experience to understand, like, how do you create something that's really valuable to people? And it's really hard to do that as a musician or an artist. Like anybody, I come from a family of artists, and I acknowledge that in attempting to do it on my own, it is not easy. And so going back to what was that conversation like, I think my wife has always been someone who's like, I think she likes that about me, even though it can be frustrating that I am like trying to figure something out and I'm not willing to settle for like a job that I hate. And that's probably a lot to do with my ADHD, which is I am just predispositioned to not be able to stick with something if I'm not emotionally engaged in it anymore. So I think she understood, and it was just about like, okay, I'm going to figure this out. Right now I'm going to start small. I'm not going to quit my job until I have enough paying clients and I'm making a certain amount. And she asked really good questions. And I think it became a dialogue around like, how could this work? Because, she could see that I was going in a different direction than the teaching career or the one I had previously thought it was going to be. So, I think that's what a good relationship is about. It's like acknowledging the other person and trying not to control them, but guide them. And she's a smart, strategic woman with good executive function. So she was able to help me navigate it effectively.
I think it's so important to have that level of support behind you, right? Especially for those of us that do have a lot of ideas and we want to succeed, but don't necessarily have the clearest picture of what that success looks like. We just know what the end result is going to feel like and what it will be like when we get there. And to have someone by your side that supports you like that, knowing that there's going to be a little bit more burden on both of you in a lot of different ways. That's really important. It just sounds like you have an incredible person by your side. I think that's fantastic. But there had to be something too that you believed in yourself about, right? You said before that, oh, I had written it down. What self-direction follows self-awareness. So from Alaska to this point where you're starting to change, right? Self-awareness is really big for you. So was there something that you believed about yourself that shifted, like you felt more capable or more focused to head into specifically the narrow lane that is executive function?
Yeah. Thank you for raising that. I think for me, I guess you could say commercial failure of my attempt to be a successful rapper slash musician, that was important,
Yeah.
because what it made me realize is like, you can pour as much effort as you want into something. I mean, I worked hard. Like I was out, it was a part rapping venture, part, clothing brand. And I spent a lot of money at the time building out the clothing brand, getting t-shirts printed, hats made, printing albums, all these things. I mean, I wasn't just like saying it, I was actually building a business.
It wasn't just a SoundCloud somewhere. You had a whole thing.
No, well, yeah, it was everything. I mean, I performed, in New York City multiple times, and I was really putting my best effort into it. But ultimately, it's not enough to just put a good effort in. You have to have product market fit, right? And my particular rap, persona was not what the market needed or wanted at that time, or, whatever it might be. And I wasn't willing to spend more years working on it. So then I followed that with another venture where I started this, and I'm an open book. So, I started another venture where I'm a very good writer. I was an English literature major, and I started like helping write papers for people. And I'm not super proud of it, honestly, because it's not something that I'm proud of, honestly, but it's something I did for a period of time when I had no money.
Sure.
And I was working at a coffee shop for $7.25 an hour, and I came upon this opportunity where I could help people with their papers, basically like a ghostwriter, and it paid so much more than any job I'd ever had. And honestly, when you've starved so long for money because you had a failed business, and then you're working a minimum wage job. This was after I'd moved up to Buffalo from New York City. I had no car, nothing. It was like the heavens had opened, and I was finally making enough money to like buy groceries and feel decent, But again, it was like I didn't love doing it because I wasn't proud of it. So once I was able to get a job as a substitute teacher, I realized like, even though this makes really good money and I'm going to make more in like a half day's work than I'd make in a full day, I don't want to do this, right? And you have those inflection points, and I don't think everybody listens to themselves with those. I know a lot of people who make a ton of money but hate their work, but they don't care because it's like, I would just rather make money. But for me, there has to be a sense of, I call it bang. You have to have a bang, which is your big, audacious, noble goal. And there has to be that noble piece in what you're doing. You have to feel like it's serving the world. Like I feel, and maybe this is part of executive functioning, but I feel like my life has a purpose. I feel like I was created with a purpose. I don't fully understand that purpose, but I know it's not to be a piece of shit, And so I'm trying to figure out what that is. And I feel like I've come farther with that, where it's like, oh, I can help educators who want to start their own small businesses. And that's closer. Is it the end of my purpose? I don't think so. I think it's one chapter, but I knew writing people's papers for them was not, even though it made me a lot of money at the time, it wasn't what I was meant to do. It was just a step. So I think I kind of got off a little track there.
But there are themes here, right? So you talked about your idealism. And then there's this element of safety right? That we all feel, right? The safety of financial safety or safety for my family with benefits and just steady paycheck and all that jazz. And I know that you walk this fine line between risk and safety, right? I'm going to risk everything, but if it pays off, we're going to be great. Or I'm going to write papers. It's kind of risky in terms of my own um, self-worth because I'm doing things that I'm not necessarily proud of, but it's putting food on the table, it's putting, a roof over my head. So there's a level of safety there, but you don't feel like it's right. It's not part of your purpose. Were there other things that you could have built that ran through your mind that would have been safer than kind of striking out on your own? And why did you say no to those? Did they just not align with your purpose?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always been opportunities, and I like this James Clear quote. He says, "Explore, explore, explore until you find the thing that fits, and then exploit, exploit, exploit." And so, nothing in all those failures, and I don't say failures, but lessons, failures, opportunities that I didn't follow, they taught me something. For example, the rapper, it taught me that there has to be product market fit. Like you can't bring something to the table if the market's not there and you don't have the thing that people want or whatever. With the writing papers for people, it was like, yeah, it's really useful. There is a product market fit, but I don't feel spiritually connected to this vocation or this pursuit. And so kind of like as I've grown, like I'll even give an example, like in the last few years, I started a student executive function coaching business after I taught, and I built it into a successful business, profitable. It's impacted hundreds of families. I've written hundreds of articles on the topic that have countlessly inspired people, I'd say, or you can count it if you're looking at like, exact metrics. But ultimately, I felt most called to help educators who want to start their own small business. And there's this concept that one of my colleagues, Seth Perler, talks about is like, we are the shaman. And I know it sounds a bit woo-woo, but the shaman has gone through some fire, some challenge, and they bring back that experience to those that they support and educate and help. And so I know what it's like to be a caring-hearted public school educator who wants to make a difference. And I also know what it's like to lose your faith in the system. And most educators who go through that, they throw the baby out with the bathwater. So they get disenchanted with education. And instead of continuing to work with kids, they go off and sell insurance or donate plasma or drive Uber or work at Chevy's, right? And they throw away their teaching experience and expertise, what I call your unfair advantage, without realizing that they could still do what they love. They could just do it from another angle. And so when I discovered that, all those other opportunities, that have come up, or flash shiny new things, I call them, things where I could make some money. And, there's always things like that popping up on the feed and in the algorithm, and right now it's AI or whatever. It's like, oh yeah, like anyone can be a millionaire off of AI. And, maybe that's possible, but it's not interesting to me like helping a transitioning educator is, because of my particular life experience. And I know what it's like to be an educator who's desperate for change, because I was there. And before I became a coach, I tried so many dead ends that now I know like it's going to take a whole lot for me to pivot because I figured something out, and I'm grateful for that.
It's so wonderful that you found that. I think so often people that are searching for their purpose or searching for the thing that they feel like they're meant to do, there's this tug of war between distraction and genuine new direction, right? It's very easy for us to focus on the shiny keys that are over here instead of doing the thing on this side that might be a little bit harder, but that might be the right fit. But with our minds going in 100 different directions, we can get distracted easily.
Yeah.
Do you have an approach to that, kind of like there's a thing that you feel, or that there's a list that you can write down to tell you what's really a distraction versus, all right, this is something worth investigating. This could be a new direction for me.
This is my favorite topic in the world, Matt, and I'm so glad you asked about it. Like, I'm so excited to talk about this because I've been thinking about this for years. You know, I've been on this journey of personal development and figuring out my unfair advantage and my niche. And so, yes. Okay. So I'm gonna start with the thing that came to mind, which is one way you can go about this is, and this is gonna sound so crazy to you at first, but you have to just trust the process, is write down 10 things that you love doing. And like, for example, it might be like, I love to weave baskets, let's just say. Okay. And then you write down 10 things you can get paid for in your, like, you actually have been paid for, right? So maybe you've been paid for, let's just use you, Matt, like doing podcast interviews with other professionals, and you love to weave baskets, right? So then it's like, is there a world where I could be basket weaving with someone while interviewing them? And how can I combine the thing I love most in the universe with the thing that people will pay me for? And it's so crazy, Matt, because I wrote this down probably 4 years ago. And I was like, there's just no way this is ever going to happen. That was the first thought. But I wrote down, like, I love to hike in the redwoods. And I love to coach people to like build a business that liberates them. And I've had that idea in my head for years. And in the last 6 months, I have had multiple opportunities pop up where, like, for example, 2 weekends ago, one of the most successful creators in the world, Yusuf Farah, he runs the biggest ADHD channel in Latin America. He's got over 1 million followers. But he was a keynote speaker at the event I do the program for, Neurodiversion. We became friends. We stayed in a house together when he came out from Mexico to Neurodiversion. And he's like, help me learn how to set up my school community. He flew out here and we spent a day walking through the redwoods and envisioning his business. And he's gone from zero to like multiple thousands in monthly revenue in school since I showed him how to do that. Right. And it was like, whoa, it's actually happening. You know, it's like, but if I had not allowed my mind to at least entertain the possibility of what I love doing most with what people will pay me for, it would have never happened. But because I just focused on it and I just kept asking the universe and taking steps and committing to it, it took years, but it can happen because you can't just immediately get what you want. That's not how things happen. You don't plant a seed and then expect it to grow. But if you plant it and you stay focused on it and you invest and you grow and you ask and you're curious, that is one of the best steps you can take, is just make that connection.
You being able to find this Venn diagram where what you love, what you want to do intersects, and you can look back now and say that it's all happening, man. It's all happening, right? It feels amazing when you can get to that point. Many of us want to get there, but we get hampered by one thing or another. Do you see a common thread through people that you're coaching when you say, hey, let's go take a walk through the redwoods and talk about your business? Do you find that there's a common trait that we have that is the handcuffs around our success, that is the boat anchor that's holding us back from what it is that we really want to do?
Yeah, it's two things. So the first thing that gets in the way, and I acknowledge that idea is super idealistic, but it starts with the ideal or the ultimate vision, because that is internally motivating. So that goes into what's known as your nonverbal working memory. If you can ideate and imagine a reality, what happens in the brain is that it activates what's known as the reticular activating system, which is basically at the top of the brainstem. All the sensory information, kinesthetic, auditory, visual, it all flows into there. And the reticular activating system disseminates those signals into the prefrontal cortex, which is where executive functioning happens, where plans are made. So all that to say is, once you have the vision, then the action steps will come to you if you're willing to think huge and act tiny. Now, the reason people don't ever make progress towards their vision is because they have that vision. Maybe they have a moment of clarity, but they keep jumping from thing to thing. And that's what I told my colleague Yusuf when I started coaching him recently. I was like, once you know what you want, and for him it was hitting 500 paying members in his school community in the next 6 months. I was like, now that you know what you want and you know how to do it, he has 1 million followers on across his social media platforms. Your biggest challenge now is saying no to everything else. And that's the challenge, is that because in our insecurity, in our lack of clarity, or we get the clarity, right? We have those moments where we're like, I want to do that. I see what that person's doing. I want that. I'm willing to work for it. I'm good at that too. But because we can't stomach the endless, boring trudge towards that vision, we just keep switching. And our energy, I mean, you can do the research, task switching, it just evaporates your concentration. So that's the biggest one, is just switching to other visions. You keep switching, and you're just gonna evaporate your resolve to get to that thing. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is that when you have that vision and you start to really think about it, and you're like, okay, well, what can I do in the next 6 months to get me one step closer to that? Right? Maybe I can't walk through the redwoods right now and coach people, but I could do some free coaching sessions with some entrepreneurs I respect, whatever it might be. And I can get in a position where they might take me seriously one day, which is what I've done. I've done so much free coaching. Don't get me wrong. It's not like immediate payoff. But the other thing that gets in the way is when you identify, like, okay, if I want to get there, I've got to focus on these things for the next 6 months, or I got to do these or post this every day, or whatever it might be. I think there's two parts. One, it's boring, and people have a hard time tolerating boring without seeing results immediately, even if it's the path. And then two, it's not being able to let go of what I call your floor. So like, if you want to be a successful coach, let's just say as an example, and you want to work with this certain group of people, and you want to do it in a specific way, if that's your North Star, there are certain things you can't do if you want to get there. You can't spend the whole day cleaning your house or cooking all your meals, maybe. You're going to have to give up some things and invest in yourself, right? And that's hard for people to do. They're like, well, I can't afford this, and I can't put this on, and I'm not willing to put it on credit or invest in myself. And if you're not willing to invest in yourself and take a risk on yourself, then what are you willing to take a risk on? And so it can be something small, but like, if you know that if you paid someone to do your laundry and you could spend that time doing outreach to people you want to coach or whatever it might be, and you're willing to trade $30 for a potential $5,000 opportunity to coach someone or something like that, you have to invest in yourself. And I just think most people, they don't want to risk it on themselves. I think it's too hard to do. There's too much noise out there that's like, you're not worth it. Don't do it. Just do this. It's like, it gets in our heads.
Without a doubt. And I will sit here and open the kimono and basically say, you're singing the song of my people, because there are so many things that I'm not averse to risk. I will do whatever it takes to reach my version of success. And I know that with that comes some sacrifice of time, of money, of relationships, of, the free time. You sacrifice it to focus on what it is that you want to do. However, there comes a time where you're like, all right, I'm going to pay someone to do my laundry, Now I got an hour. You know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to sit and dissociate from everything because I finally have an hour to myself where I'm not thinking about success and the things that I have to do and the sacrifices that I have to make. And there's this imbalance that a lot of us experience because we want the thing so badly, but we have a hard time getting there because we're so exhausted trying to get there that the moment that we have some time to ourselves, we just kind of shut the engine down. So I say that because I think what you're saying is resonating with so many people, right? And the questions that we have to raise to ourselves to say, is this the thing that I really want? Is this the direction that I really want to go? Am I spending my time in the best way possible? And sometimes I can answer that very clearly and sometimes I can't. And I bring everything back to me because I know that I'm speaking for a lot of people that have the same kind of feelings, especially at my age, the Gen Xers, the late Gen Xers. So one thing you said earlier, though, was talking about attention span. And it brought up this notion of attention span, and that through using ChatGPT or doom scrolling, that our attention spans have gotten shorter and shorter and shorter. Do you think that that has a direct correlation to us not wanting to spend the time to master a craft or get good at the thing because we're so conditioned to look for the next hit of dopamine that we're not willing to put in the hard work?
Yeah, I think I like how you said the master the craft, because I think that is the core of this, is that the crafts person is the entrepreneur. You have to have that idea that I am a craftsperson, even if it's something technological. But like, you have to feel like you're working towards mastery of your craft. And I think there's a lot of research on flow state, and flow state is, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's like flow state is where you're not thinking, you're engaging in something. Like, think of an athlete playing, or an artist painting. It's you're doing something that's challenging. That's like, it's not guaranteed. Like, you are challenged. The task has to be like slightly out of your comfort zone, so it's like challenging you. It has to be one goal. You have to be working on one thing and not multiple things. And there's probably one more condition which I'm forgetting. But anyways, the idea here is that like, we want to seek activities that challenge our flow state. And that's where we develop that craft, because we're engaging in it and it doesn't feel like work. And I do think AI is awesome. And I use AI for things, but I use AI typically as a assistant and not as a like ideator. Like, my ideas that's where the magic is. Like, I understand as a human what I need as a human.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell people, like, when you interact with someone, you're picking up on 11 million bits of information that's flowing in at that moment, right? That's, 110,000 bits of visual information, 50,000 bits of auditory information. Like, there's so much information flowing in. Going back to that analogy of the reticular activating system, the conscious brain can only process 50 bits of those 11 million bits per second, according to research.
Wow.
So below the surface, you're still receiving whatever 11 million minus 50 is, right? And it's there. You just aren't necessarily using it. So as you get to know yourself and your vision, you have access to more information than ChatGPT could possibly leverage in any moment, right? You put something into ChatGPT or AI, it's only receiving the text or the verbal that you wrote. But if I'm talking to you, like, Matt, you and I are having this experience together. Like, you're picking up on things I'm saying, you're shaping your questions based on that. And like, we don't value that enough, And I think we think AI is going to fix things, but AI can't create your purpose for you. It can't help you attune yourself to your environment. I mean, maybe it can do certain things or give you prompts or whatever that help, but this is an inside game, right? When you're trying to really level up into the version of you that feels most aligned with the life and purpose that has been gifted to you. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's
It,
kind of my
you
thoughts
know,
on it.
it really does. And it leads me, and it's a perfect time for a pivot on this because I want to spend the latter half of our conversation here on the getting small part, right? That I talked about at the very beginning.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's funny, as you were talking about flow state, this really kind of got into my head. We've got 11 billion bits of information out there. We're only bringing in 50, right? And it kind of sounds like everybody's email list, right? We've got thousands of people on an email list and we get like a 3% open rate, right? So we get, maybe 50 people of those 6,000 that are regularly opening the emails, right? In your case, it's a little bit higher, but you're getting the sense of scale. So with that, you have this notion of true fans, right? So as we focus on your audience and the followers that you've created, I don't like to use the word followers. I like audience. I like community, right? And it feels a bit more intimate to me. But you've got these members of your community that are following you for all this great information and deep research and understanding of how they themselves function. You're not someone that chases vanity numbers. How has it been growing from a single person knows about Sean McCormick, right? Because 6 months ago, I was the ice cream wrapper in New York City. No one knows about me now. Like, what do I do? How do I build this? And over time, you've built this list. But you've always maintained this part of think huge, act tiny. Small is better. The intimacy is better. Can you talk to me a little bit about why you don't get caught up in the numbers and why you focus on a smaller group rather than trying to, reach millions of people and focus on millions of people? Instead, you're focusing on that 50 bits of information. Can you talk me through a little bit of that?
Yeah. There's a painter. I used to be really into painting. And there's a painter, or maybe it was William Blake. He's a poet. I'm not sure. One of them, some painter or poet. They said the road of excess leads to the palace of wisdom. And I tried to be big. When I was going to be a rapper, ice cream rapper, I was going for the home run. Right. I was like, I want to be up there with Eminem and Tupac. Like, that was my vision. And what happened on that journey to pursuing popularity or vanity metrics, basically, was, I thought I was in it for the right reasons, but I wasn't. I really just wanted attention probably at the time. And validation from my dad or something,
Right.
But I was immature. So I couldn't understand my needs in a way that I do now. And so the reason I'm able to go small and just focus on impact over everything else is because I've gone down that road of pursuing, vanity metrics, and wanting attention and like, what's going to blow up? But it's like, my wife said this to me one time. She was like, if you ever meet a genie, don't tell him you want to blow up, because you'll probably blow up. And it's like, yeah.
So you chase depth and not reach necessarily, right? You like the depth of a relationship rather than having just numbers.
Yeah, well, I think it's like as you go through that experience, and I've gone down the road where like I was chasing more just coverage or attention, there's just nothing there. It's just like, I mean, I didn't achieve any. I'm really lucky that I didn't hit it big. I would say that. I'm really lucky, and I 100% believe that, because it's like everything in my life started to screw up at that point, Matt. When I was just chasing that, my core relationships started to diminish. I've been sober for 5 years, but I was using recreational drugs and drinking, and I was just lost. I was lost as a human being, and it took a lot of therapy to get where we're at now. But I was very lost as a human. And And I'm so grateful that I failed there because I have such decent clarity. I mean, things are going to rock my boat, in the future. I'm sure of that. And um, but, but I've learned that, yeah, there's two games you can play in life. There's chasing wealth or status, chasing wealth and chasing status, right? So status is like, I just want people to know who I am, right? And that's a zero sum game because there's always going to be someone who has bigger status than you, right? Like Trump's trying to figure that out right now. He's like, I want to be the top status, and that's like, you can see what that looks like in action, you know? And then there's wealth, and wealth is a define it yourself game. And so for me, I define wealth as wealth of relationships. I get to have beautiful conversations with people like you, Matt. Wealth of financial, like I have enough money to do whatever I want, which is great. I mean, I can't do anything, but I can do a lot of things. Wealth of time, like I volunteered yesterday at my kid's school on the last day of school. I just took the whole day off and did that. And so it's like, I have such wealth in my life that, that's amazing. Right. And I'm not competing with anyone, and so for me, I'm the winner, in my book.
With saying that, right, I got to believe the conversations in your house are pretty amazing. With your daughters, what is the thing that you hope they're picking up subconsciously from everything that you're doing?
Yeah. Another part of this journey, and I think this goes back to what you were talking about in terms of like, if we are trying to figure out our journey and our life path and our purpose, one thing I've done is writing down like a statement of purpose for your life, right? Because when you have that, it's kind of like a North Star for your decision making. And one of the things I wrote in my statement of purpose, there's actually a cool activity you can do. It's called like the Life Plan Kit by this guy, Michael Hyatt. He wrote Free to Focus. And he has this thing called the Life Planning Kit. And it's a really great activity if you ever want to like sit down and really think about what the next 10 years is going to look like. And one of the things I wrote in there about I wrote this statement of purpose for my life. And I wrote, I'm the most influential man in my daughter's lives. And so for me, like one of the things I tell myself for my children and my wife is like every day I want my children and my wife to feel like they're the most important people in my life. And then the question becomes, what can I do today to prove that to them and myself? So that's what I want them to feel. I want them to feel loved. I don't want them to have this core feeling of I'm not loved or I'm not valuable. I don't deserve my dad's attention. So that's my priority is like, how do I transmit that energy? Because I think when you love yourself, then you believe you can do things, and that's not natural to me. Like there's a lot of self-hate in here, trust me, that I've worked through over time, but I'm aware of that. And that's where executive function starts, is being aware like, oh, wow, I have some really outdated beliefs in this operating system and I need to replace those. And I do this exercise, Matt, where I'll lie in bed and I'll imagine digging out like weeds or things like I'm not valuable or I'm not worthy, and replacing it with a seed that is like, I'm worthy, I'm valuable, I deserve, or I can receive the abundance that life is presenting to me. And that might sound crazy, but it really works. You know what I mean? I can testify that we do have to replace those beliefs inside of us that are like, I'm not deserving of finding a purpose that impacts millions of people, or, maybe I'm just lost. And, I just think that everybody's story, your life is perfectly engineered to be exactly where you need to be right now. And you have the opportunity to create something of beauty and impact. And, just holding on to that belief, I think, is really, really important. And so that's basically the energy that I try to give to my children and my wife and the people around me.
I love that. I love that analogy of digging out the weeds and planting new seeds. Because one of the questions I was going to have, there are actually two questions, and you kind of answered them both at once. which is great because we can just now finish the interview. It's done. The two questions I had, one was, what's your favorite tool when you have to coach yourself? And it sounds like it's digging into a little bit of that self-awareness. And then the other question that I had is, one of the things that I've heard you say is you try to bring enthusiasm to people's lives. And there've got to be moments where you lose your own enthusiasm for what you're doing. How do you get that back?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's natural. And I love the word enthusiasm. I was just talking to someone about this week, actually, because the word enthusiasm, I first discovered this when I was taking mushrooms in college. And I don't do mushrooms. As I said, I've been sober 5 years, but I've had those exploratory experiences. And I was like tripping, and in that moment, someone said, enthusiastic means enthuseo, which is Greek for God within. And so that's like channeling that like higher power, outside of you and within you. It's like the Force in Star Wars. And so, I mean, yeah, especially as an adult with ADHD, I've had some highs and lows out here.
Yeah.
But I think for the most part, these days it's pretty even keeled. And I attribute that to this long ongoing process of removing things from my life that are detrimental. I mean, and it starts with big stuff, right? Like at the beginning, it might be like, I'm not doing drugs anymore or alcohol, right? Or whatever it is that's holding you back from showing up in your life. And then you start to like, if you dig in, you're like, oh, like, why do I spend time with this person who like says mean things to me? And you're like, oh, I could just end that and, choose not to like. And so it's like this ongoing iterative, I call it like an infinite spiral. Like if you continue just to like remove things that are not healthy and add things that are healthy, or just don't do the unhealthy things, it's amazing how quickly your life can improve. And sometimes it's a thought pattern that we have to really interrupt, right? And it's like, it might be you telling yourself, I'm not enough. Like, I mean, the most successful people in the world, like that are doing so much, may say that to themselves, and it leaves you. And that's something I dealt with for decades, is like always living to achieve more and more. And I'm still aiming for stuff, but I'm trying not to connect my sense of self with that anymore. I'm trying to unplug, like, this is just fun. It's my job. I do it. It's meaningful. And my real sense of self is like, how do I show up in my relationships with my family? How do I show up in my community? As opposed to like, if I make this much money or achieve this, I still have those goals. I just don't want them to determine how I feel about myself anymore.
That's so well stated. You mentioned a moment ago about weeding out the parts of your life and the things that don't necessarily serve you or that make you feel bad. And, I don't know if I'll probably screw this up, but I think it was The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. I think it's where I read that, or maybe it was a Joe Dispenza book or something, where it's basically saying like the voice in your head is like your roommate that just never stops talking and is constantly telling you bad things all the time. And if we listen to that over and over and over, we're just going to believe that those things about ourselves. But we totally have the power to evict that roommate and get them out of our lives and stop hearing that incessant babble about how we're bad at everything. Why would we tolerate living with someone like that, yet we allow it to happen in our brain all the time? And I know for me, when I finally was able to visualize it like that, it shifted a lot for me because I could hear myself talk more clearly. And it's vicious at times. And I like what you were saying about, removing some of those things from your life. And if you can, it's not the easiest thing in the world to do because your brain's going all the time. But if you can visualize these voices that are telling you it's too risky, or you're never going to be that, or you don't deserve it, or, you're making up stories about how you're perceived. you're able to just evict that roommate if you so choose. Obviously, it's a little woo-woo. It's not as easy as it sounds, but what it really directs you towards is a bit of self-awareness and honesty and introspection. And it's easy to say, it's harder to do. Now, when it comes to executive function coaching, it's probably easier to coach than it is to coach yourself. And there's that whole, cobbler's kids has no shoes. How do you feel and how do you fit in with thinking about all the stuff that you're creating, that you are living the example for some of your students and colleagues and, people like me that just watch what you do? Where are you with all of that? Where do you make sure that you're getting the attention for yourself that you need that isn't necessarily coming out of your brain? Where do you go for answers?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be 100% honest and transparent here because this, that's what this is about, right? Having a real conversation. For me, I'm in a spiritual program, so I'm in AA. I've been in AA for 5 years and had a slip up, but for the most part, I've been sober for 5 years. And that's not for everybody, of course. But for me, the purpose of that program is a 12-step process that's like an ongoing daily process that completely focuses on how do I focus less on myself and more on the world and the people around me and the environment that I'm tending to. And growing up in America, it's like, it's all about you. Everyone has a different experience, but I'll say for me, it's all about freedom, and like, how can I be as free as possible and not care about how that impacts anybody else? And that was cool for a little bit, or, for the first 25 years of my life. But once you engage in that level, that approach for long enough, you realize like it's seriously flawed and it actually holds you back from feeling happy. And so then you have to figure out what is real freedom, right, for you if you want to go on this journey. And it's kind of like the hero's journey, where it's like you got to go into the cave. And the cave is that unknown, murky place where you're going to refuse that call and it's not going to feel good or easy. And it's hard work, and I am not like, I have bad days, like, no doubt. But I have a system, and I can rely on it. And part of that system is one, like recognizing that I am not my thoughts. I will have horrible, terrible thoughts or, think of bad things that I shouldn't do or whatever it might be. But that's just my brain being what it is. So that's part of it. And I think it's also like remembering that I am a part of the universe. I am not the center of the universe. And so even though my body and everything tells me I am the world and it's like I'm just a part of this. I'm just one little person in this freaking infinite, beyond galaxy universe. And so when I remember that and I turn it over to the universe, I'm like, look, thank you for creating me. Like, I don't know why I was the single one chosen of all those other little guys at the beginning of this story, but like, I'm here, and thank you. And then every day I'm like, how do I, Gandhi said it, and I think this is the absolute truth. The best way to find yourself is in the service of others. And service is such a cool word because you can serve someone a coffee, and that's a great way to show up. Like I start my day making my family breakfast and, after I've been up doing my inner work, before everybody's awake, because that's important to me. But like, how do you be of service in a small way where it might be like opening the door for someone, which makes you feel good? I like to say self-esteem is built by esteemable acts. Like the more you just do every day, the better you feel. So it could be something small like that, but then you as a person, like Matt, for example, like you're an incredible, like you run in it. This is the best podcast interview I think I've ever been on because the depth of the questions and just like, I'm like super impressed. I'm like, wow, you have a real gift. Like you're able to really set this up in a way where, I'm like, how did you know about Alaska? Like we got to go into that. But it's like, that's another a form of service where you're going to bring, I'm grateful because you're bringing my story. You're making it a better story because of the questions you ask, right? And that's like another form of service. So that's where I'm challenging the listener or anybody is like, you can show up in a small way, but like, what is the way you've been called to serve that might be like extraordinary, but might be something you're ignoring that you're really good at, right? Like, don't downplay those things you're really good at because, you know, other people would really want to have the gifts and abilities you have. And that's hard to remember those sometimes when they feel normal to us.
I think it's very hard. Thank you for the kind words, by the way. I think it's very hard for us to see in the moment a lot of what we bring to other people, right? Because we're always thinking about the next thing. We're always looking for what can I be doing for me? What can I be doing for me? And I've never heard someone say that when they helped someone, they felt worse for it, right? There might be an outcome that they didn't plan, but I rarely hear people say, I wish I never helped him. You know, you just don't hear that because we get such satisfaction from helping the humans around us, right? And I think if we spent a little bit more time on those close to us, rather than thinking we can solve the world's problems, maybe by doing that, we could change the larger scene. One of the things that you've talked about is getting 10,000 coaches by 2032, right? You have this big, audacious, noble goal, right? Your bank statement of getting all these teachers out there. What's the world you're trying to make with that? Forget about the number. What's the world that you're trying to make?
Yeah. Thanks for asking about that, Matt. I appreciate it. For me, my journey of being undiagnosed and going through, life, I didn't get diagnosed till I was in my 30s with ADHD. And ADHD is complicated because and this will make sense. ADHD is complicated because it is both a gift and a challenge, right? Like so much of my, I don't want to say impulsive, but like pursuing things that were kind of dead ends and also just like needing stimulation, whether that came through drugs and alcohol or, activities that were just really stimulating, were fun in the moment, but sometimes had negative consequences. And so basically, I'm grateful that I figured it out and I found a system that works for me at this point, right? Things can change, life can change, and I've got to be ready for that. But in terms of like wanting to move towards that goal of training 10,000 coaches, when you look at the research on education, there's a study done by this guy, John Hattie. He's basically aggregated thousands of what are called meta-analyses of studies on education. It's the largest study ever done. It was documented in a book called Visible Learning. And he documented what has the greatest impact on student achievement and what has all the way down to things that have a negative impact on student achievement. And he did 256 factors. So for example, the most impactful thing on student achievement is collective teacher efficacy, where a group of educators are supporting a student towards the same goal. So when they're aligned around a goal, it can have a huge impact on student achievement. They rank it, they actually give it a number. So that factor had a factor of like 1.6. And the average effect size of all these factors was 0.4. So basically, I know this is complicated, but the thought there was that like a factor with 1.6 had the ability to accelerate learning by 4 years, 0.4 times 4, 1.6, in a 1 year period. Now, in that study, you can Google it. If you go to the very bottom of it, it starts to go into things that have a negative impact factor on student achievement. So things like corporal punishment, deafness, right? You start to see factors that are like negative 0.8, like really, and it actually, you categorizes them. At the very bottom of that list, negative 0.9 is ADHD. And so globally, ADHD has been recognized as one of the things that has the greatest negative impact on student outcomes. Now, I understand that as someone who grew up with ADHD because I'm glad to be alive, honestly. I did a lot of crazy things, driving around, just being reckless. And that was because of my ADHD. it wasn't because I was a bad person. I've come to terms with that. I am not a bad person. I was just dopamine hungry as a kid, you know? And so I think that if there were more executive function coaches who because ADHD, they're actually planning on changing the name of ADHD to executive function deficit disorder. ADHD is a deficit of executive function skills. And so I think if the education system was more focused on teaching kids valuable executive function skills like how to self-regulate, how to plan, how to organize, how to communicate your needs, how to be self-aware, that America, the world, would be a better place because we wouldn't be so focused on, writing and math. Those are important things, but research shows that a kid who has better self-regulation skills and better self-direction can master math or master writing or master any concept because they have self-awareness, they know how to task initiate, and they know how to act on their vision and their ideals. Whereas just teaching someone like calculus, it doesn't make them a more moral or, focused person necessarily. I mean, it could have positive indicators. But so basically, that's why I just feel so strongly about this, because I feel like it's something we're really missing and we need more of right now in this attention hungry world.
And what's the term you use for that? Is it educational poverty? Is that what I've heard you call it? Or
Yeah,
like there's poverty in educators. Like we just don't have enough out there so that they can.
yeah. Well, actually, so what I had is I had that podcast in the past, Earn More Tutoring, when I basically branched out of the education system. And my goal, my mission for that podcast was to eradicate educator poverty. And that's kind of a play on words because there's two parts of it. There's the actual like teaching things that you don't actually believe in, but the system is what it's designed to do. It's just like churn out results. But it's also the educators are like, I mean, you've probably seen this, but like there's a lot of educators that they can't pay for their lives, I mean, especially in rural America and places where the wage is so low. And that's a problem. I mean, if it's like, I was talking to someone at the farmer's market yesterday and it's like, it's a part of a bigger issue, which is if teachers can't pay for their lives, and then they can't stay in the system because it's not meeting their needs, and then less kids are working with talented, skilled educators, then less kids are getting educated.
Mm-hmm.
Less educated kids means they're just going off to join the military, and we're just feeding this military industrial complex, which is not going to serve us. We need educated, informed citizens. That's what we need more of. Right. I mean, thank God for the military, and I'm all for patriotism, and I'm grateful for our soldiers and all that. But also, we need to educate and empower our youth in our country, and give them the best of the best. I mean, we should have the best education in the world, being a superpower, whatever we are,
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I think we're missing that executive function piece, and we're kind of narrow sighted, I think, as a larger collective.
I love this conversation, and I'd intended to talk about, small audience and getting people to follow you. And I love this direction that we've kind of followed for the past hour about kind of the realities and the impacts of executive function, not how to solve it, but just all the peripheral stuff around it and how more pervasive it is than I think a lot of us are aware of. And we're so insular and wrapped up in our own shit. And we don't think about the fact that we're not alone in feeling some of these things. I think it's a lot more common than people imagine. I wasn't diagnosed until I was in my 40s. And then once I was, everything kind of clicked into place. And I realized there was this whole tribe of people that knew exactly what I was talking about. And it changed my life. And I just love the fact that we're talking about this, because part of what my purpose is to bring a lot of these issues out so that people don't feel like they're doing this whole, observation of life all alone, right? Carl Sagan said it, we're hydrogen atoms observing other hydrogen atoms, right? And all we're trying to do is figure this shit out for ourselves, and sometimes it's really hard. So
Yeah.
I'm going to start landing the plane here, and I wanted to ask you, kind of that first question, what's the world you're trying to build? when you're 70 and you look back and look at the time in Alaska, you look at your time in the classroom, you look at your time in music or what you're doing now in coaching, what is one of the main beliefs that you've had that has changed over the years that has elevated you to this position? Has there been a belief that shifted, let's say 5 years ago, that when you look back, you look at that Sean and say, wow, I can't believe he believed X, Y, Z. Is there one big shift in there that you think, when you're 70 and you look back, you're like, that was the belief that changed everything? Or that was the moment in time that changed everything?
That's a great question. I'm kind of digging through the Rolodex here.
Well, you've been so open with the fact that there was, you had issues with addiction. You had this overwhelming sense that you needed more and wanted to be bigger, but didn't necessarily know how. And I haven't been able to pinpoint it, but it feels like through what you've talked about that there was a real deciding moment, whether that was one day in a hot parking lot and you're selling cell phones and you're like, I can't do this. This isn't me. Was there a defining moment?
Yeah. I think there's two. Is it okay if I have two? I just feel like
absolutely
I think, and it's always like a ladder. I'm sure I'm gonna have more that define the next stage, but I think two really stand out. The first one, the first one was, I remember I was in Buffalo. I'd moved up there from New York after my, attempt to start this rapping career. And I was, it was 2013, in November 2013. And they called it Snowvember in Buffalo because there was so much snow there that people's roofs were collapsing because it was like the craziest snowstorm the city had experienced. If you haven't been to Buffalo and experienced winter there, it's like winter is coming by, it's from Game of Thrones. And at that time, I was walking through the snow from work to home, and I was so depressed, Matt. It was like one of the hardest times of my life. I remember carrying a bag of groceries and slipping and like spilling the bag of groceries on this ice and just being really sad, honestly, about my life and where I was, and self-pity. It's not a healthy thing, but it was a high level of self-pity. And there's a place for that in life. And I remember I got home, and I don't know if it was that day, but it was sometime around then. And my mom has been really like, there's that person in your life who just loves you like unconditionally and just shows up for you all the time. And that's my mom. And she had sent me a snippet of an article. Like she sees an article, she'll snip it and put it in an envelope and send it to me. And it was an article by this lady, Vicki Robinson, I think is her name. And she wrote the book, Your Money or Your Life. And it was a story about how she had bought a duplex and lived in one side, and then someone else had paid the rent for the other side, which paid her mortgage. And by the end of the experience, she owned the house and was making rental income. And it was like one of those moments where instead of thinking about how I could be famous or successful, I was like, I want financial security. I'm tired of like chasing whatever attention. And that was a groundbreaking shift in my life, that like what I actually wanted was like financial security. I didn't want, it was just a shift. I was like, oh, that's actually more important. Like I've tried this thing, and that's what I want. And so I spent the next probably 10 years really zoning in on how I could create that in my life, which is what led me to finding that intersection of, but I want to do this, but what creates financial security? And before it was just, I want to do this. And that was the only thing that mattered. Right. So I think that was the first big shift, which has been, I can't overstate how important that's been in my life, is like having that financially minded pursuit. Mm-hmm. And then as I've hit my financial goals and all my dreams there have come true for the most part, which I'm so grateful for. And it's hard to believe, that like if you stick with something long enough, it actually does happen. You set these financial goals and you create that for yourself. Along that journey, that became less important because it was on, I don't want to say autopilot, but the system is there and I do the work and I get the results nowadays. And so, but I realized I still haven't reached what I wanted. It's like the U2 song, I still haven't found what I'm looking for. And so the second major realization that I've been grappling with is that like achievement does not fill the empty cup, right? And that what actually I want is feeling loved by the universe or by what I conceive to be my higher power, and like knowing that I'm loved, and that even if someone says something mean to me, or even if a parent, thinks I'm a failure or whatever it might be, I'm still loved by the universe. And that's why the universe has given me so much, is because it has love for me. And so keeping that in mind at all times, like no matter how bad my day is or how disrespectful a client or an employee or whatever it might be, any difficulty comes up, the universe loves me and it's giving me an opportunity. And like trying to always remember that it's not happening to me, it's happening for me, I think has been the probably second biggest shift beyond the like taking myself seriously.
It's a great answer. Great answer. I want people to find you. So I brought up a couple of your websites here. The first is the Academy, the Executive Function Coaching Academy. And people can come here to learn about shifting from being a teacher to a coach, correct?
Yeah, so this is the roadmap. And thank you, Matt, for pulling this up. And I just gotta say, Matt, you are the pro at eCam. Like since the moment I saw you in the meeting, I was like, this guy freaking knows eCam, and I want what he has. And I'm just like experiencing it. Here is just, yeah, I love the way you wield this tool. It's like the tool chooses you, right? It's like Excalibur.
Yeah.
Just pull that out. Like, so anyways. Yes. So this is my website. At the top, you can see the book, and I wrote a book. It's free on Audible in YouTube. I recorded it with my own voice in terms of like, so it is like a pure from the heart. So there's plenty of free stuff, the case studies, the industry report. And then if you want to actually book a free call with me and do a coaching session, you can just click Get Certified. If you're thinking about becoming an executive function coach, we can have a free coaching session where I'll walk you through, help you understand your vision and map it out. And then at the bottom at this website, actually, there's plenty of goodies. There's the free 5-step workbook, bunch of little mini courses, free training. So it's all there. Yeah, I appreciate you bringing it up.
Yeah. And then, you've got this as well, which is kind of more the personal brand site. And I'm putting this stuff out there because as people search Sean McCormick, which I'm sure they will, there's going to be a few different things that come up. So this is a bit more about a different style of coaching or a little bit more clarity, correct?
Yeah, this is something I'm still developing. So if you put your email in there, it would not work, at least at the moment we were recording this, but it's making me think I should do something about this. But I have been having this vision of thinking bigger than just coaching. And I'm not really doing too much about it besides kind of building out this landing page at this point. But right now I am working on a book about executive functioning and how you can basically apply what I've learned to your life. And so that's probably the first big step I'm taking into helping adults, someone who doesn't even want to be a coach for students or anything like that, but think about like, how do you apply these principles, whether it's to your parenting or to your business or to your career? I want to kind of transmit these ideas in a book, and this website is kind of like where I may take it further. But if you did want to speak to me about something outside of coaching, you could just send me an email at support@seanmccormick.me. And I'd be happy to chat with you or connect about it.
I love that, and I just wanted to pull this up because you're someone like me that has his fingers in a lot of tangentially connected pies. And I look at it all as cornerstones of a much bigger building. right? And we're just putting one row of bricks on at a time. And sometimes you just got to put some of these foundations down. And I I feel like there's this evolution from teacher to coach to, incorporating your founder capabilities and growing this larger. I'm sure there will be directions that this goes in that you never expected. And that's probably really exciting for you, I would imagine.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm just, instead of trying to control everything at this point, I'm just trying to be open to the invitations that are put my way. And I don't say yes to everything, of course, but when it aligns with my values and where I feel like I'm going, um, there's so many things that are going to be put out there, and I think it's just about saying yes to that, what I call your one thing, and saying no to everything else. And this was a big yes for me, Matt, to chat with you here. And I think there's going to be more things like that, more opportunities in the future. And so, I'm just excited. Honestly, I'm just excited. I'm
That's
like,
great, man. And
I hope I stay alive.
yeah, well, there's no doubt. I mean, we don't know, but we'll just do the best we can while we're here. And, the fact
Yeah.
that you said yes to this and I was able to have a little bit of a conversation with you, I know that this is going to resonate with just a ton of people. And I can't thank you enough, man. So I'm very conscious of your time. I know you got to run. Hold on here for just 1 second while I shut things down. But guys, everything for reaching Sean is going to be in the show notes. All you have to do is just check that out after this and get in touch with him, Sean. It was an absolute pleasure to have you here, man. And I can't wait to talk to you again soon.
The pleasure was all mine, Matt. Thank you so much for the opportunity and just the thoughtfulness of everything. I appreciate it.
You got it, man. Talk soon.